Six bayonets, comrades. We're here with the Chief Guard of the Republic radio veteran shout-out show with your co-hosts Mike Tooman and Paul Burvitt every Saturday, noon to 1, except today we're going to do a noon to 2 because the White Sox start at 3. And WRMN, 1410 AM. You can stream us live or get the link for the YouTube live channel at WRMN1410.com. You call us in at 847-931-1410, and you can text us on the 505-926-1410. Hit us up with the comments on the YouTube live channel. And I want to put in a very special thanks for the predecessor, Marcus, who put in a real good plug for us, Paul. Real nice guy. He went to the same high school I did.
Thank you.
He went to St. Rita, but I went to Quigley South, but it was the same building by the time St. Rita bought it and moved in.
That was nice of Marcus. Thank him.
So we both have a link, like if it was if I was two separations from the Pope, I'd have to say that the Pope Leo XIV was there teaching physics when Marcus was going through St. Rita, when it was the building that I'd gone through as Quigley South. So there's my 2 degrees from the Pope there.
6 degrees of Pope Leo right there.
Yeah. Yes. And so I like happy Flag Day to everyone.
Happy Flag Day. The flag is up in the remote studio right here, right behind us. So
nice.
Happy Flag Day.
I got a flag behind me.
Happy Army birthday, too.
The Army birthday. And we got people walking across the street wearing Burger King. Wearing Burger King crowns there. And they're saying, like, no king, no king. So they're getting ready to invade England, I think.
Well, we already defeated England. They're a little late to the party, like 250 years.
I think we want to move and take England over, too.
That would be nice.
Move back to the old country, so to say.
That would be nice.
That was the full intent of the Founding Fathers, I'm sure. Anyway, so the Army's 250th birthday. I was in the Army Reserve
Happy birthday to the Army.
National Guard and did a lot of active duty tours for 38 years of my life. So that's more than 10% of the existence of the Army, which has been in existence for a quarter of a millennia. That's just really loud. And that is the reason they're having the parades in the Capitol in D.C. to celebrate all the veterans for the last 250 years that have served in the Army. So I think I think it's special. I think a 250th birthday is special. And so now, a call out to my people at the Blue Box Cafe, had another wonderful sandwich. And so we're going to talk today, I think, about we talked about this before, the ways you can activate the military. All right. And I think it's become topical again with the activation of the National Guard in California and Texas, and the differences to how they were activated. So in California, the president called up the National Guard, which is his right to do, and put them to assist law enforcement in enforcing the laws of the nation. So that's over there. ICE was having problems. They were demonstrating against ICE. They were demonstrating against federal buildings and putting these law enforcement officers not only incapable of doing their jobs, but in danger. So he calls up the California National Guard to prevent this, so they can enforce their laws, so they can take people that have violated our laws into custody, which is not what was happening in California at the time. And we had a judge, and we talked about judicial accountability and overreach. And here is a judge, and we have a purely national defense issue, and it's covered under Title 10 of the United States Code 12302. And it's not really a long code. It's not really a long title, and it's not a very long chapter, 12302 of the chapter, but it specifically says the presidential, as the president call it, the sec def, an emergency declared by the president. And it goes down into saying that to enforce laws it's not very long. I could pull it up and read it verbatim, but everyone else could pull it up.
Yeah.
And to have a judge misinterpret that and say that he's got to give it over to the state, when, of course, Title 10 U.S.C. 12301 states that he could give it to the state. He could call up, well, no, 12301 is different. I'm talking about Title 32 of the U.S. Code. That comes up later. But the president, with the consent of the governor, can call people up for active duty, all right, into Title 10. And I'm talking these numbers, Title 10, Title 32, I might mention Title 50 and Title 14, but Title 10 covers the U.S. military, specifically federal forces of the U.S. military. And Title 32 covers the state forces of the U.S. military, the militia, the National Guard and Reserve troops. But so under Title 10, when soldiers are called up under this Title 10, they fall under the national forces, the federal forces, the commander-in-chief, the president of the United States, the secretary of defense. All right. And right now, I looked it up, and they would fall under FORSCOM. The U.S. Army forces would fall under Forces Command. And then they would distribute it where, and it was already decided. Now, under Title 32, troops, when the governor asks to have his troops activated under Title 32, or the president activates them under Title 32, they fall under the governor's jurisdiction, but they're still paid by the federal government. So the governor can call up the president and say, listen, I've got a problem. I need National Guard troops to be activated, but I don't have it in my budget, or I don't have the money, or I think that it's a national defense issue, so it should fall under federal government to pay for this. Can you call up a couple units of my National Guard under Title 32? And then those soldiers called up under Title 32, they still get the federal benefits. They get the pay, they get the retirement points, you know, to qualify under Title 32. Now, the third way they could be activated in the state is by state active duty orders, which are called SAD, S-A-D. And there's a reason it's SAD, because when they're called up on their state active duty orders, they don't have to pay them the rate of the U.S. military. So if they're called up under Title 32, a sergeant for every day he's on active duty gets paid the exact same as an active duty sergeant. A lieutenant or a major gets paid the exact same. Under Title 10, they get paid the exact same. Under SAD orders, they're only required to be paid minimum wage by the state active duty, and they get no benefits. It doesn't count for retirement points, all right? And if they're injured, it falls strictly under the state. It doesn't go to the VA. The VA doesn't consider that active duty. They just consider it state active duty. So you have to go through your state to get any benefits from that, like workman's comp or something. So now you have the governor's, like, he could have asked the president, you know, that you're going to have riots, you're having civil unrest, it's a national security, I would argue, an invasion issue. What he called fifth columnist. If anyone knows what the fifth columnists were, Trojan horse. Maybe people realize that. But people that are almost sleepers that come into the country undocumented, unwatched, hiding in the shadows, and then at significant points they come out to weaken the country in such ways or to encourage these protests. So for whatever reason, the governor did not foresee this happening, or they didn't foresee it happening, so they didn't ask for federal help. But the federal help wasn't there to prevent the riots, right? The federal help was there for law enforcement, to enforce the laws of the country, to assist ICE in enforcing those laws. And it's absolutely covered under Title 10 of the U.S. Code. So, Paul, you think that district judge was wrong?
I do. And Marla wanted to point out some issues here with Title 10 USC 253.
We pulled up the law and it says interference with state and federal law. The president may authorize use of the militia, armed forces, both or by any other means for the purpose to suppress insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combination or conspiracy of it within a state.
Yes. And here's another thing. He can also call up, if he wanted to, he could call up Arizona National Guard to go into the state of California to quell any insurrections.
But we also have section 251 of 10, federal aid to state governments in the event of an insurrection against the government in any state. The president may authorize militia of other states at the request of a governor or its legislator to utilize armed force to suppress the insurrection. So it says this section is a statutory exception to the posse
comitatus.
So you are correct. That's why a few years ago, when when they needed help in Texas, that's why they also sent National Guard members from other states down there to assist them.
And the thing was that they're considered a foreign invasion. All right, it was a national thing. And now many people may misunderstand. All right, militia. Militia has been used in the past as a pejoratory term. All right, because everyone considers militia to be associated with ultra right-wing nationalistic ideals. But the militia is in the Constitution, a well-regulated militia. It's in the Second Amendment to the Constitution, and it's a citizen soldier, right? The citizen soldiers. Now, the National Guard developed out of this well-regulated militia. It became the National Guard. Before 1775, when the Army came into existence, the Continental Army, there were state militias. Each state, each one of these colonies had a militia to defend them from the French, Indian tribes, possibly other invaders, the Spanish. So they organized these militias, which later turned into the Guard. Some states still have a militia outside of the Guard that falls under the state, that the state governor has absolute control over, that the federal government does not have control over. So I don't know if California is one of these, right? But that would be, the state calling up their militia to assist them. And normally that's for assisting law enforcement in issues and natural disasters. When you need someone to come in and block the levees, fill sandbags, rescue people with helicopters, they'll have a state militia on there. And they almost mirror the military ranks, but they don't mirror the pay structures either. So militia, as used in a pejoratory term like the Northwest Militia, or people using it as a terrorist organization, the militia is the citizen soldier defending the country. And is there a legal term, definition for militia?
Well, it would be a group of people that are together for the common purpose of defense.
Okay. Yep.
So I mean, it could be a formal organization, or it could be a loosely based organization. That's kind of how the Texas Rangers formed and then became their version of the state police. The Texas Rangers were like a militia, and there are other states that had that. Like, you're right, it was like more like for the state itself, because states have unique things. And in Texas, it was because of the Indians and the other groups. But it's the militia is just a group of people formed with a common purpose for usually defense of an area, usually a larger region like a state. Yeah.
So them coming together, when we have requiring a well-regulated militia comes under the National Guard. And the National Guard, for the most part, the National Guard Bureau is funded by federal dollars. It's not like all the states collect up money and, fund the National Guard Bureau. I guess in a way through taxes and everything, the National Guard Bureau is funded through the states, through the population. But it's not like the state collects taxes and then the national government has a per capita on the state. I know in like the American Legion and the Knights of Columbus, we have like a per capita. So we have our local council or our local post, and we collect membership. And then national has a per capita on that, and they say, oh, we want so much money per each of your members so we can maintain the national thing. So it's kind of like we're charging our members and we're paying that membership up to national. So I don't, if it was like national just charged this per capita separately and then you paid a separate membership for a post, so you'd have to join national first and then join a post. So with all the federal funding, and this is a thing where the federal government has the states kind of by the throat on this, is if you don't comply with the federal request, to activate the federal troops, the governor says, well, he anticipates, if he anticipates the president, the federal government calling up his state National Guard, he could put his state National Guard on SAD orders, the state active duty orders, and that supersedes the president's right to activate them because they're already activated for a state. The state emergency comes first in that case. And that would prevent it from happening, but as soon as they did that, then the president and the Department of Defense and Secretary of Defense would rightfully be able to say, well, if we can't use you federally, there's no reason for us to fund you. And that's a lot of funding. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of trickle-down money. That's a lot of soldiers left out in the cold. That you're in the National Guard for 15 years and suddenly you lose the funding, so you can't get paid on active duty orders. You can't go on active duty. You have to transfer to another state guard if they'll have you, or transfer to the Army Reserve if they'll have you, if there's a slot for you, if there's a vacancy. And that's all at the whim of the governor on that. And of course the state legislature, because it's possible that the governor says, I don't want you, he says, I'm not going to ask for the troops, and the federal government's not offering them, but then the state legislature overrides the governor and says, we're going to ask for the troops.
Don't put it past some of these governors to do that, though.
Oh,
I mean, that would be, they spend, we saw some things, there's some things out there that say that these folks in California were paid, $6,000 to $12,000 a week. There's ads on Craigslist and stuff like that. So, somebody's funding this big time, and don't put it past them. They had thought this out or hired people that knew stuff that would allow them to do exactly what you're saying, to, try to block their guys in from being able to, and they don't care about the soldiers that are out there. Though some of these governors could care less about that.
So let me kind of like put this in a parable, not to be biblical or something. I'm the mayor of a city, let's say a small village, right? And
right.
I got elected because I own the #1 window installing company in the county, right? I install windows, right? And my police tell me, word on the street is that a bunch of rioters are coming in with bricks to break all the windows in the city. And I'm the one that bought the rioters the bricks. And so am I going to tell the police to be ready to stop them or to go out and stop them? I'm going to say, nonsense, nonsense. There's nothing to show that. You're conspiracy theorists. Take off that tinfoil hat. People wouldn't do that. What reason do they have to destroy public property? And then it gets publicly destroyed, and you're like, well, how was I to know? I'm just the mayor. I'm not an intelligence expert, and my people possibly didn't tell me, or they didn't tell me the right way, or I misunderstood them. But, you know, for a discount, I can fix all the windows in the city. Well, it wouldn't be that direct. You know, I would have cutouts because let's talk about ethical violations there. But
The only problem with that is you forgot to mention that the chief of police, his brother-in-law, owns the board-up service too.
yeah, but
That would be complete.
yeah,
That would be the Chicago way, by the way.
that's absolutely the. I have no doubts that there are communications on a higher level that I am not privy to. All right, that people turned their head the other way. They knew what was coming, and they like the reason he didn't call for that, and he should have known. Here's one of my beefs with politicians. In the Army, if you take a position, a higher level position, if you're promoted into a higher level position and you take that position, you could be charged with incompetence if you're not able to do the job. You could be criminally charged for not being able to do the job, even though you got promoted above your thing, because you're supposed to be expected to know how to do that job. So you no longer have the defense, I didn't know how, or whatever. You don't have that defense. Figure out how. Find someone how. Find out how to do it. Read the regulations. So you got these mayors going, I'm just the mayor. How do I know? How do I know this didn't happen? Well, there should be a thing, knew or should have known, right? And if they should have known, because you're the mayor, that's you should have known, and then charge them with criminal incompetence. Because you should have known. You're incompetent now because you didn't put in the right people in place to tell you, to give you the intelligence. And then if they say, wait a second, we did give him the intelligence, then he knew and allowed it to happen. Then that's in criminal incompetence too. That's it's like the true.
That's dereliction of duty. That's really bad.
Yeah, but you know what? It gets up to these high levels, and all I got to say is, like, on the department I used to work at, all the boss, not all the bosses, but a considerable amount of bosses, all went to the same AA meetings. Now, I'm not saying AA is a bad organization, but these guys all went to the same AA meetings, and they all had dirt on each other. So he says, hey, you pull up dirt on me, I'll pull up dirt on you. Mutual defense, the nuclear option, right? Mutual destruction. So you got the people there, and it's just like, I've got mutual destruction on you, so I'm going to do whatever I want because you're complicit in this too. But all of a sudden, a non-complicit actor comes in and says, I'm not putting up with any of your nonsense. We're just going to stop this right now. They have, the spin is unbelievable. All right, so we're going to break. We're going to come back, and I hope I'm not ranting too much, but Happy King's Day. I love my king. He's up in heaven. He's the one king. And if we have a day for him, that's awesome. Guest, the illustrious Marla.
Hello.
Hello. And so I calmed down from my little rant that I was going on there. And it's true. Okay, I have no proof of truth, all right? But it makes sense, and it's logical that someone is paying for this to happen. Pellet loads of bricks are not generously donated by the Chicago Brick Company or whatever company made the bricks to be dropped off and to be ready. The same bricks and everything else. I said I wasn't going to say anymore. The organization to getting people out there that are willing to throw a brick at someone. Paul, how many people do you know personally that are willing to throw a brick at someone they never met?
Nobody that I know.
Yeah, I really don't associate with those people. I've locked up a few of them. Right. But they had personal reasons for throwing these bricks at people. They had personal vendettas. There was a personal harm done to them, face to face. To get a person to do that, and someone they didn't meet, they don't know this person's family. They don't know who's getting involved. They're just random strangers. That's a specific type of person that doesn't just randomly show up.
They don't have a conscience.
That isn't a spontaneous. It's not a spontaneous event. There had to be planning involved. There has to be funding. Someone's got to pay for this. A lot of these people that are there, if you had, Paul, if you had a job, you're making $150 a year, $150,000 a year, or $100,000, or even let's say $75,000 a year, would you put your earning ability in jeopardy by being involved in this?
You bring up a good point, because in the last couple of days, I have a little YouTube channel where I do things of interest with trains and models and in nature and stuff like that. And in the last couple of days, I've been watching, because I watch a bunch of different channels, and there's these what we would call influencers, and there was this one, and they seem very intelligent and things like that. And one of the women influencers got on there, and she was talking about, how they were using the rubber bullets and stuff like that, and rubber bullet, because News 9 out of Australia, one of the reporters got hit with a rubber bullet, right? And somebody said, I know friends, and they've been hit with rubber bullets, and this isn't a joke. Yeah, and I
It isn't.
Under my name, I wrote, I don't know about you, lady, but nobody I know has ever been hit by a rubber bullet.
Oh, I have.
You need to get, well, I know, but but she needs new friends. And then there's other people out there. There was a protest about 3 days ago in Chicago in the late afternoon, and there were a lot of people. And there was a live feed from a helicopter, I think from ABC. And I went on there and I said, doesn't anybody work? I mean, when I was 23, 24, I was a lawyer. I had people's lives at risk, whether they were going to be charged or whether I was going to take their houses away from them for violating some state law. These people, all they do is walk around and chant. I mean, and I doubt very much if they're going to be my doctor in the future, or if they're going to be anybody I would really go to. So I don't. And some guy said, work remote, bro. I go, well, you can't get more remote than a demonstration when you're working.
Yeah.
So
how many of them had their cell phones out and were actually conducting business, working remotely while they're demonstrating?
The only business they were doing was filming themselves in the orgy of panoply of stupidity.
Yeah, well, they are attention deprived. All right, so
right.
They want attention.
You might be right.
And they look
Probably right.
for trouble because they enjoy it.
The other thing that comes out, and I've read a lot of Russian authors, and one of the great ones is Eugene Onegin by Pushkin, Alexander Pushkin. So it's been translated. There's been operas done on it. There's been plays done on it. But Eugene Onegin, and I'm going to give a spoiler there because it's like hundreds of years old, right? So Eugene Onegin suffers from ennui. That's spelled E-N-N-U-I, ennui, all right? It's a French term, and it means I'm rich, entitled, and bored. I'm so bored. What am I going to do? I'm suffering from ennui. So you have these kids, they don't work because they're trust fund babies. They don't work because they're suburban kids whose parents made a lot of money or making a lot of money, and these kids don't have jobs, or they're underemployed, or they work for their parents, or they're on their parents' payroll, but someone else is actually doing the job. And all right, and they might be waiting until they're 30. They're burning off their wild oats. So they're going around and they have nothing. They don't care because they're suffering from ennui, and this is some excitement. And they're going to change society. They're going to change it that way. And it's a lot of entitlement. So I'm not saying these kids are not working. They're broke. But if you can make money at the same time doing it, why not? And are these kids likely to be throwing those bricks? I think the kids that you're paying $6,000 to do that are likely. But
I'm going to tell you something else. This has been going on for a while. All right. It's been, to my knowledge, it's been going on since the Obama administration. But every May Day, they used to meet at whatever that park is, Union Square or whatever it is, and they'd walk and they'd march down the street, and they'd interfere with me getting back to the office from court or me leaving the office and going home, and they'd be demonstrating all over. They block the sidewalks, they block the street. The sad thing is
People have lives to do.
somebody might need an ambulance. Somebody might be getting a panic attack by the crowds and turn into a heart attack. And I always remember one of the last things my dad did on the police department. A guy asked if he wanted to go for a ride, and they went in a wagon. And there was a woman in a high rise, and she was having a heart attack. And my dad and the other guy went up there because of the first emergency vehicle to transport her to the hospital or whatever. And her kid was blocking them. And my dad got on the radio and he said he needed another ambulance. And the guy says, "What do you mean, you two ambulances?" He goes, if you interfere with your mother going to hospital, I'm going to shoot you. And then you're going to need the ambulance. And then the guy said, "Go ahead, go." And you know what?
You had to put it in terms he could understand.
Right.
And you got to be believable.
That's what these people need. They need to understand it's not their right to hurt others. Now, I don't care if they want to stand around with a dunce cap that says "No More Kings," or I don't care if they stand around with a sandwich board sign, that says,
Here's I'm sorry to interrupt, but it just came up and I'll lose it, right? The one thing I could say about these people wearing "No More Kings," that they're absolute monarchists. Whenever the British royalty does anything, they're 100% into it. They're like, whoa, oh, Princess Diana and all that. They'll tell you everything about Princess Diana, but they're going "No More Kings." But they worship their royalty, and their royalty, all right, the press creates royalty, all right? Being a public figure, not just a public figure, but a popular public figure, they create the royalty of Hollywood. Like, oh, these people, they're so smart. You get some dunce actor that's been trained to read lines, and for some reason, someone wrote those lines, and they won an Oscar, and they're making some money, and now they say something that they thought up themselves, and you realize what a dunce they are, right? You realize what a dunce they are. But the press and everyone by popularity has made them royalty. Royalty. Because he's popular. Well, how would he get that rich? And
they made him that way.
They made him that way.
They pump them up, and then they're also the ones that when they're tired of them, they bring them down to bring up the next new thing, to sell new or get new publicity. They are the ones. They're the William Randolph Hearsts of the modern times.
Yes. Yep. And once you lose your
ethics and grounding and your responsibility to the public.
Once you lose your relevance, your total relevance, then you got to do crazy things to try to get your relevance back. And they don't get the relevance back through going more conservative, because that's too difficult for them. But it's really easy to go more left,
radical,
right? Radical,
more radical.
The words, people, liberal, all right, or conservative, all right. There's good things about liberalism, all right. You want to have. My daughter's going to get on me for all right. You got to have a human compassion that's there. It's not, of course, we have personal responsibility. You have personal responsibility for your own actions. There are some things that overwhelm that. There is that middle, there's that crossover from personal responsibility and human compassion. All right, there's that area there. So when you get
it's called moral decency, is what it's called.
moral decency, that's right. But that could be contradictory to conservatism, right?
That is true.
All right, and liberalism, the moral decency could be contradictory to liberalism, because if you were robbing a guy that worked hard his whole life, right? Robbing some guy works hard his whole life and everything, to give it to someone who's just laid there because you feel compassionate for them because they haven't helped themselves, where they're fully capable of doing it, that again it's contradictory to the moral decency, everything. So, so I was just, we'll talk about the groups out there, because I think we're on a little bit of tangent, but I would just watched for the 100th time, the 100th different remake of the, oh yeah, Jesus Christ is King. Yeah, there we go. All right, guys walking around with no kings.
Amen to that.
Amen.
I say amen, brother.
Amen. And anyway, so, oh man, they just drew me for a loop there. So I was watching the 100th time remake of The Count of Monte Cristo. All right, The Count of Monte Cristo. What a great book. I don't say it's the best novel of all time. It's up there with the top 10, I'm sure, because I think that the Les Miserables was actually the best novel ever written. I really love that book. But in The Count of Monte Cristo, the movies love to change the ending and put Edmond Dantes back with his first love, Mercedes. Right? Puts him back with her, and everything goes off decently. In the book, all right, and in this movie, the movie got it, well, it was actually a television series. It actually got it right in that Edmond Dantes, in getting his revenge on Villefort, which is the state prosecutor, the French prosecutor, in getting his revenge, he indirectly caused the death of Villefort's minor child, who was an innocent. So he indirectly allowed that to happen. So at that point, he crossed the line. He really crossed the line there. And he tried to, he had righteous indignation on his side, and he thought he had what you call moral decency on his side, until the point happened where that innocent died. And now he's got to live with that his life, and he's trying to make up for that. He's got all these riches, and he's going to make up for it. Right? So you're some goof out there being a goof. Right? You think you're a little narcissistic, you're self-centered, you're thinking about yourself, you're privileged, you're having a good time because you're no longer suffering from ennui, because look at all the excitement and everything. And you are part of the reason that some lady has a heart attack and anyone has a heart attack and the ambulance can't get to them. Or remember the great movie Falling Down?
Yeah, with Michael Douglas.
And he just loses. He's trying to get a job. He's working hard to try to get a job and everything's going wrong. Everything's going wrong. And no one cares about the other people involved, how it affects other people. So here you are not caring about that, but the press isn't going to tell you that because of these demonstrations, I'm generalizing again, of course, right? Because of these demonstrations, these people likely suffered catastrophic consequences that were innocents, not involved. And they don't put
I was watching the recent riots in Los Angeles, and I watch a couple of different feeds, like Agenda Free, JLR, AXN, and a couple of them I got to see local reporters. The outside journalists were filming local reporters. And one of the Hispanic local reporters said one of the best things. She said, you know what's really sad? She said, I grew up in this neighborhood. These are all Hispanic businesses that made good. They've destroyed them. They've painted their windows. They've closed their business. They can't make any money. So in an effort to clothe ourselves in the revolutionary Hispanic Mexican flag and our riotous situation, we've hurt our people who came here legally and made it well. And we've just ruined them. And that, to me, is traitorous.
Well, that's good. At least she's broadcasting that, because now these guys are, now we know sociopaths don't care about anyone else. So you could broadcast them. You could sit there all day, right, and show them the human suffering consequences of their action. They won't shed a tear. They won't blink. They will yawn. But how does that affect me? You know, that's the way some people are. But that I can't believe that that's the majority. That's a lot of people in the United States. I can't have that little faith in humanity that there's that many people there, because I would never leave my house.
Well, you got more faith than I have. When I see waves and waves of these people riding by, I mean, I watched them. They took over the 101 expressway. They're using this scam of a scooter to destroy squad cars. And then there was one, I think it was the second night, I was telling Marla that I was watching the horse police. And, you know, at first I thought that they were going to take the horses to arrest, and they formed up in a park. And then they went on Cesar Chavez Drive and Spring Street. And then all of a sudden, a bunch of squad cars came. So they weren't exactly the riot police, although they did have riot helmets on and clubs. And they were going to clear a street. And then the horses went with them. And, you know, they didn't leave anybody to protect their cars. And you know what happened? Their cars got wrecked. They slashed them. They busted the windows. You know what?
That's incompetence of command. That's incompetence of command and leadership.
But the people that did that, they're subversive.
Yes. That's a target. What are they going to hit, Paul? They're going to hit soft targets.
That's correct.
All right.
And they're going to make it so that the police can't mobilize to the next location. Then they're going to, and that tells you there's on the ground intelligence that did that. And those people are not Americans. Those people,
okay.
And the overthrow of the government can never be violent. If you want to do it politically, you do it politically. But these people can't do it politically, so they're resorting to violence.
Every riot is a psychological operation action. Psychological operations are a form of warfare. All right. So psychological operations, in Birchgold, they did it. I was at the Birchgold Bridge riots back in the 90s when we're in Bosnia. And they were absolutely 100% organized. They bust people in. They had it ready to go, right? And they had people with radios there controlling the crowd. In the after-action review, I'm telling the colonel, I says, I don't care if no one has film in their cameras. You need guys out there with cameras acting like they're taking pictures of these guys, because you don't want them to be anonymous anymore. You want them to know that we know who you are, we know what you're doing, we know you're in charge, and we're going to backtrack you. The guy that they got handing out the masks and everything, he's got to be as simple as Forrest Gump, all right? He's got to be one simple guy that can't remember names or anything else, because I would squeeze him for all of his connections. I would backtrack that guy. I would backtrack the money. I would have a link matrix diagram, little yarn going on the fence, pointing back to the one guy and having enough enough, what do you call it, circumstantial information, enough logical trail to put that guy in prison and to seize all of his assets. You think that's going to happen?
Federally now, maybe, but not locally.
It might take some time. You know, you start doing that, and now you're doing a thing called a counterattack.
Well, I'll tell you this, and I don't want to get to be political, but I think 99% of the people from January 6th were charged with misdemeanors, and some of them were in jail for almost 4 years. I think it would be appropriate to do the same thing, charge the same type of misdemeanors with these people and leave them in federal custody for about 4 years before we hear their cases.
All right, but they got the whole power of the press behind them. And when we come back, we got like 2 minutes left for this half of our show. We're going to talk more about this. I like this tangent that we're getting on. And if I'm being too political, let me know. I'm not trying to mention political parties here or which side I'm on. I'm just mentioning what I believe is right from wrong. And if you could see a good reason for this so-called rioting, an absolute legit reason for it, that you could tell me where it's within the constitutional, within the constitutional that this is allowed to happen, I'm all with you. Please call up, but be polite. I'm not going to swear at you. I'm not going to call you names. Be polite, and we'll discuss it. You call in here at 847-931-1410 if you don't want your voice to be heard, because, you know, sometimes they could track you by your voice. You know, you could send us a text at 505-926-1410. Use your burner phone. Use your burner phone and text us in. Or you could just go through your, what do you call it,
You know what? I just thought about something. We've got it all wrong. All those fires were just smoke signals, so they couldn't be tracked.
Yeah. You can also hit us up with the comments on the YouTube live channel. And, you know, you could always use your, they're constantly trying to sell it to you for your web browsing to protect you.
VPN?
VPN, your virtual private network.
Yeah.
They'll never find you.
Yeah, use the alias account that you created.
Yep, and the VPN.
Right.
And your neighbor's Wi-Fi.
That's right. And route it through Moscow.
Yep. Gospel, but I have to say that, and yes, it is in mockery of King's Day because he's freely elected by popular vote and by the Electoral College that was specifically designed to protect the Republic. So was there ever a republic run by a king, Paul?
No, not really.
They called them empires, didn't they?
There might be a democracy run by a king, but there are no republics.
There was a democracy run by a king, and that king was elected. That's Poland. Poland elected their kings, right? And they were a democracy, but they had a problem, all right? They had a problem called Librum Veto. That's where one of the nobility, because, well, you didn't have the working class, you still had the nobility in charge, and the noble titles were dished out by the kings, all right? And the nobility was in charge in the Diet and the CM, and if one person voted no, then the measure didn't pass. So that was a big problem. But, okay, so getting back to this, it just came up here because I go off in fits and spurts with my rants, and I'll lose my train of thought, I'll derail, and maybe I'll find it later. But human trafficking, and let's use the good word for it, the old word, not the good word, but the old word, slavery. All right? You have people coming up north, and I have a heart for them. Yes, they live in countries where they have little to no hope. It's very bleak. Their existence is bleak. And they're not organizing enough in their own country or have the proper organization, or the country that makes their existence bleak is so overbearing on them that they can't organize, that they do have, that the country has a good intelligence, and that intelligence organization is there to keep the despots in charge. So for whatever reasons, they're able to get out, they're able to come up north, maybe for a better way of life. Because they have nothing back in where they came from, and they were incapable of organizing to change everything. They're up here and they become, what do you call it? They become slaves, almost willing slaves. They have thrown themselves into the circus. Right? They throw themselves into the circus there and hoping that they'll stay alive long enough to be the top gladiator or to get out. And there are people that take advantage of them. Right? So one of the things is, why aren't the U.S. citizens that provide aid, not aid and comfort, but also employment, and are benefiting off the labor of these illegals? They are benefiting off the labor of the illegals.
The exploiters. They're exploiting.
They're highly exploitive. Much like drug dealers, they have a simple thing to sell, drugs. They make a huge profit. Well, you have labor to sell of people that are working for pennies on the dollar, but you're charging dollars on the dollar. So you may pay them $1 an hour, $5 an hour, but you're making $20 an hour off their labor and a couple of these. And then you're able to cook the books, or for whatever reason. But when it's proven that you have benefited off the labor of illegal aliens that were not here to work, that were not here legally or had no legal right to work here, then you should pay the consequences of that. You should go to prison because it is against the law. And you should be fined appropriately, or your profits seized and returned to the government. If that doesn't happen, for the same reason, because these people on the other side of the border that benefit from essentially slavery, they benefit from it. They make such huge profits that they're able to influence. By influence, I mean BRIBE. So that's how I spell influence. Is that how you spell it, Paul?
That's correct.
They bribe the people.
Or pinstripe patronage, or what do they call it? Where you benefit your relatives, if not yourself. I can't think of the term now, but where you're benefiting your relatives, not yourself. Yes.
So at one point, the law enforcement was told to look the other way, right? Because people were benefiting from this labor. All right. Now it's not so much. It's going to be out in the open, right? And law enforcement will not have any credibility left if they continue to look the other way. Because, okay, these people are being paid by who? Well, it's illegal for them to be paid by this guy. So why isn't this guy, gal, or why isn't this corporation being fined? Why aren't the officers of the corporation in prison? Right? So at one point, so the only way the people you have to influence, BRIBE, are the press. Because the press is going to sit there and make law enforcement, like they always do, because it's the easy target, make law enforcement look bad. They're going to be the bad guy. And these are just poor oppressed people. What they don't say is the people that are bribing them are the ones oppressing the people. If you think that lady on the corner selling candy bars, right, is keeping that money, you're simple. All right? It's the guy that's selling those boxes of candy to those ladies every morning, and they only keep all right, what they make in addition after they pay for that box of candy.
Well, I'm familiar with one that shows up at different corners and all over the south suburbs. And I've always noticed that there seem to be some
We've seen people get dropped off.
and
absolutely.
some gang members
I don't know who it is.
work in the area maybe that are part of this. And so it's pretty bad.
It's slavery, and we're encouraging slavery in the United States. And who's important to slaves?
Are the drivers that encourage it, thinking that I'm so good I helped somebody today.
Yeah. Yes.
They're the most delusional.
We've actually seen.
We've seen people.
There's men out there too, but and children that should be schooling.
Right, children that should be in school, children out in the hot and the cold. It should be somewhere else.
What do we know about the Chicago Public Schools? Do they care whether you're a citizen or not when you go to register?
No, because they get paid by how many students are in their classes.
And when that kid goes to school, does he get fed?
They get all their meals that the taxpayers pay for, whether they can afford it or not.
Yeah. So why are these kids out there? So that's like child abuse. And people, well, they're afraid their kids will be taking care of them. And when was the last time the Chicago Public Schools called ICE on someone?
They prevented it.
That's not so it's not a reasonable argument. See, if I was doing a child abuse case on that, and the lady, through an interpreter, and maybe she spoke fluent English or whatever, said, well, I was afraid that immigration would come get me. I said, well, I don't believe that. But now, guess what? I will take your kid away from you and we'll deport you. Or we'll send you back, raise your kid over there the way they let you. But it's a heartstrings thing. It's a psyop. It's like feel sorry, but it's a modern slavery. That's flat out it. Modern slavery. Even a lot of these guys collecting out there, regular guys, what do you call it, Caucasian guys out there. You know what? Those corners are bought and paid for. Right? And they put them out there, and now they got to pay protection so they could work that corner. They got to pay some. So you give that guy money, he's paying money to a guy that's protecting his corner for him. That he thinks that guy actually owns the corner, but he's allowed to beg out there because this guy. Oh, look, we got more Christians proclaiming the day. We should call this Christian Day too, Flag Day and Christian Day. So I want to get that word out there to people, all right? Don't encourage the slavery. Don't feed the polar bears, all right? Don't feed the pigeons. Don't encourage the slavery.
Remember, Mike, if you give a pigeon food, you feed him for a day. If you give him a gun, you'll feed him for a lifetime. Pigeon,
yeah. So one of the things, as I was a police officer, and I very rarely made drug pinches. They're just annoying, right? Very, very annoying. And I would lock up, every once in a while I'd have to lock up a junkie because they were just being junkies. And I would tell them, I'd say, why do you hate me? They go, I don't hate you, officer. I says, no, you absolutely hate me. You despise me. You want my kids to starve and you want me to die. They go, what do you mean? I says, well, you give these guys money, they buy guns, and to protect their drug business, they shoot and kill me with the money you gave them to buy the guns. So why do you hate me? They don't see it that way, right? So what are you doing when you pay for these people? And here's where the human compassion and personal responsibility and everything crosses over, right? There's a crossover there. But it's contradictory to the things there because your human compassion should be, this woman, should not be a slave of this guy. And she's going to remain that slave so long as you give her money to pay him or to pay her or pay, okay, I'm not trying not to be misogynistic here. I'm sure there's a lot of very evil women as long as evil men. I'm sure it's an equal proportion that they're all taking advantage. There was a Netflix show or something on the woman cartel leader down in Mexico, or was it Colombia?
I think it was Colombia.
Yeah. So equal opportunity, but there's equal opportunity to greed. And did she have any compassion for females? Nope.
No.
Nope. Didn't care about children. No one cared about that. It's all the money they give to you. And the easiest way to get that money is drugs. I mean, you don't got to think about it. People get addicted to it and they keep buying it. You know. So I would say to the people out there, like you said, be aware of what you're doing. And you feel bad about not helping these kids, but you got to look at the secondary thing. You're not giving. She's the intermediary. That money's going to an evil person, a slave owner. You're paying for the plantation, buddy.
There should be organized activities that are supported by.
The organized activity should be
by the
taking
municipality,
ICE, or taking Chicago Police Department and rounding up these people and then interrogating them and finding out where their handler is. Then finding out who's the handler and finding out who his handler is. And then take these people compassionately, deport them if they're illegal, because they're just providing income for the other person who may or may not be illegal. He's the big criminal. But you get one of the U.S. citizens that's operating slavery, human trafficking, benefiting off this, come down with them with the sledgehammer of justice, the full force of the law. And none of this, make sure that they take some heavy time and they lose everything they have. And the other guys will see it, and you know what? They won't be so open and notorious about it anymore, will they?
No.
I think that's the biggest offense I take on it. It's the open and notoriousness about it. I used to get really mad when I was interrogating someone as a detective, and they would tell me a lie no one would believe. I'd be like, man, you have no respect for me. I'm going to leave.
I used to tell them I saw that movie, and it wasn't good the first time I saw it, Yeah.
I said, I'm going to leave for a half an hour. I'm going to come back, and you have a better lie. I'll know it's a lie, but it better be better. But the openness and notoriety, and to have so many people in a bubble with their face in a screen, listening to what the paid influencers, if you don't think those people aren't being paid to influence you in one way or another, all right? And you're looking at that thing and they're telling you this is the popular thing to say, and you look at 20 other people and they say the exact same thing, and out of those 20 people, not one person has said anything in dissent. Well, they're all getting paid to say it because they're all making money off you while you don't see what's actually happening. It's the magician, look at this hand, don't look what this hand is doing.
Pay no attention to what the man behind the curtain's doing. He has nothing to do with this.
The pickpocket that's sticking his thumb in your ribs while he pulls your wallet out of your back pocket. You're too busy feeling, your ribs getting stuck. And that's what they're doing to you. And do you think these influencers have compassion about that? Do you think they say, hey, you know what? I could see for reality. I'm looking at the other side of the deal here, and you know what? They got some good points. These people aren't making any money. When I go to a restaurant or somewhere, and you go to the ballpark, you can't use cash anymore. It's got to be like the credit card, and they ask you for a tip, right? And first thing I asked the girl or the guy working there, I says, "Do you really get that money? Because I ain't giving a tip if you don't get the money." Some of them are like, "Oh yeah, we do." If they say no, I says, then it's just going to the boss. He's just making extra profit. And he's benefiting, he's oppressing you with the machine, with this credit card thing. Because if I paid cash and gave him a cash tip, the guy could just put the cash tip in his pocket. So the people that don't, they're guilty too, at a certain level. But how do they feel that guilt about themselves? They have to have an innocent die because of their actions, like in the Count of Monte Cristo, right? The innocent died. Sure, you got justice and everything, but an innocent had to do that. Was he deserving of that because of what this other guy did to you? And then we get into the crime of punishing the sons for the crimes of the father. I mean, how do you get off with that? Unless the son is just as bad as the father, but you have no proof of that with a 7-year-old child. So the people that cannot feel remorse, embarrassment, or shame about their actions because they're getting paid money, try to avoid that. And it happens on both sides. There are a lot of conservative radio talk show hosts I will absolutely not listen to because I'm like, nope. I've caught them a few times listening to what they said and knowing that they said something differently, and it's just because the way the winds blow, and I says, okay, no credibility. You're doing it for the money. You're not doing it out of compassion or anything. You're simply, this is your niche. This is your stick. And I hope I'm not coming across that way. You think, Paul? If anyone,
no, you're speaking the truth.
I don't want to be confused with
There's a lot of people that are will give you a story while they're making money, and then they don't even believe the story they're telling you, but they pretend to, just to keep their audience rolling.
Yep. Yeah, and that when that comes out, that reflects bad on everyone.
That case I was telling you about the 100 miles from the border it's a Supreme Court case. It's U.S. versus Martinez Fuente, 1976. So that's been in effect for almost 50 years, and we're not using it.
Well, like I said, I was down in Arizona, all right, and I was on my way from Tucson to Fort Huachuca, and that's considerably far from the Mexican border. I think Fort Huachuca is maybe 40 miles from the border, but I was between Tucson and Fort Huachuca, and I got pulled over, and they had a big border patrol roadblock there. I get pulled over and they look at me and they're just like, ha, 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 ha. Showed them my military ID. They're like, yeah, you go ahead. Because, I'm not swarthy enough. And I'm, but in Miami once, I got stopped in the airport and they held me for like 6 hours. I had my passport, I had my military ID, I had my government orders, my ticket. They just held me there for like 6 hours. And then they said, oh, you came back clear. I says, that's good because I'd hate to have to arrest myself. I don't know what they were thinking, Maybe,
they give you dinner?
No. And I was almost late for work that night. So they don't just pick on swarthy people. Everyone could be, but yes, okay, so that, one of the other things, we got 3 minutes. Do we got a caller?
Yeah, we got a caller and 3 minutes left.
All right, we take the caller for the 3 minutes as long as you called in. Hello?
Yeah, it's Cleveland Dennis.
Hi, Dennis.
Hi, Dennis. Hi. I've been leaving comments, on the YouTube feed, but it's a powerful statement you guys are making. I mean, it's a knockout. I mean, you should be having this broadcast everywhere and anywhere because it's a sense of reality. That's all I got. Enjoy the show, and thank you for the time.
Thanks, Dennis. As long as Dennis called, I want to give a shout out to Gary, the woodworker, and my cousin Janine, who's out there listening, and anyone else that might be listening to my show and Paul's show. We like
to send shout outs to our loyal listeners and people that comment to us during the week and say what a good job we're doing. We really appreciate you all, and we hope that some of you will call in, and we hope that at the very least we're thought-provoking and you learn something. If you think of something or learn something new every week, then we're ahead of the game. And
I've been learning a lot. Yeah, I'm gonna have issues because I'm having some snapbacks now, some flashbacks on stuff, some pretty brutal stuff. But yeah, so we'll be back next week on the wonderful 1410 WRMN out of Elgin. See us at WRMN1410.com. And as always, you can watch all of our old shows on Chief Guard of the Republic channel on YouTube. So I've got them all uploaded except for this show.
Happy Flag Day.
Happy Flag Day.
God bless America. Happy birthday, the Army. And happy birthday to the President.
And happy King of the Universe, Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Amen. We good?
Fox River Valley, I call that place my